Hello, all. Welcome to the Voices of AI Leadership. I'm Malti Vakalanka, CEO of Bio, a data and AI intelligence firm. We work very closely with organizations to turn complex data into decisions that people can trust. On this show, we have conversations from builders who are actually making a real difference using AI. And today, I'm super excited to have Victor Brown, the CEO and founder of Excellent Life, join us. Victor is building a platform that brings together AI, data, and behavioral science to support well-being, performance, and healthier decision-making at scale. And this conversation is very timely because burnout, stress, and mental health challenges are becoming part of everyday life across workplace, families, and communities. So Victor's work sits right at the intersection of AI, human sustainability, and real measurable impact. So Victor, I'm really glad to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me be on the show. Really excited to have a conversation and looking forward to getting into it.
Awesome. So let's dive deep now. So Excellent Life focuses on applying technology to improve well-being. I mean, what I read from your website and performance outcomes. So what gaps do you observe in traditional wellness or engagement programs that convinced you AI and data could offer a more effective solution? And talk a little more about what your company does and your product does.
Sure. So, a great question. I'll give you a little bit of the origin story. I did not start out in healthcare. I started out in the energy sector where I
Oh, nice.
started as an engineer, spent 5 years as an engineer, then transitioned to different roles, but spent a total of 20 years where my subject matter expertise were software applications to protect critical infrastructure. I naturally thought I was going to retire in the industry. It made sense to me. Then my dad was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I started getting more involved in his health and wellness. And I was quite shocked that healthcare operated the way it did because it made no sense to me. And the reason it was so profound for me, I give people this analogy. Like, if you can imagine, what if we said, hey, here's a nuclear reactor over here. Why don't we let it start to melt down and then we'll go in and try to correct the issue? That'd probably be a pretty alarming thing to hear. Certainly would be an effective approach. It caused catastrophic failure and loss of life. Well, for me, that same kind of characterization of a ridiculous approach was the standard that we bear in healthcare. Like, everything's based on some kind of reactionary kind of approach once a person experiences a symptom. And I knew that this wasn't the most optimal way as a result of that approach. And also as a result of a very limited use of data, that there was so much suffering that was happening that was unnecessary. So that was really the thing that prompted me to putting together a solution that ultimately, became Excellent Life. And so that solution is very similar to what happens in the energy sector, but just applied to the human body. I knew that technically, at least in theory, the human body is very much like a sophisticated electrical network. So that means that it can be monitored and protected in the same way. It just needs to be understood at a more granular level. And so through sampling data from all these data sources that we have all around us, so wearable devices, databases that have our health information, real-time information that can be input into software from users, can be utilized to really provide a much richer profile of the individual that can be understood. And so that became the vision for Excellent Life. And we characterize that as real-time human diagnostics. Well, as I spent more time in healthcare, there was one reoccurring theme that I started discovering. Certainly the technology itself and the utilization of kind of like real-time insight is good, but the single greatest thing you can do in healthcare to affect the outcome is behavior change. That is the real challenge. It's behavior change, whether it's diet, whether it's activity level, whether it's just changing how you behave in some fashion can have the greatest impact. So we knew that we needed to couple that real-time kind of analytics component, that visibility of your health, with some kind of behavioral change component. And what I started seeing was also a reoccurring theme in the industry that frankly wasn't very effective. It was more of a cookie cutter approach where these general perks and discounts were being utilized to drive behavior. And just in a broad way, it just wasn't driving behavior in a great way. So what we did is innovated in that area and said, hey, we're going to take that same kind of budget that's generally applied to driving behavior and we're going to carve it out in a different way. We're not going to pay everybody, we're going to gamify it. And so we gamified it by having people compete to improve their wellness. And where we actually measure the level of improvement in wellness. And so that improvement awards them points, and those points go to a winning a competition. But when they win, that money is not spread out across the entire population, it's only going to the winners, then they're winning much larger sums of money. And by the way, who has the opportunity to improve their health the most? The people who are least healthy. So you naturally
Yeah.
incentivize the population that bears the greatest cost on the system, but also the population who needs it the most. And so that's kind of our approach and what we do in Exxon Life. We combine real-time human diagnostics with gamification, where we incentivize it using a technique we call wellness as a currency. And
Nice.
really excited to kind of play a part. This has become something that's a part of my purpose in making the world a better place and given my experiences that I still have with my dad, who unfortunately now has um, early stages dementia, which is can be a function of type 2 diabetes. All of these things that are very preventable. And so I know how millions of people around the world are either dealing with a condition that's preventable or have a loved one that's dealing with a condition that's preventable. So Excellent Life exists to make, life better for those individuals and their loved ones.
Wow, that's a great motive, Victor. Especially prevent before it occurs is a great thing. And I do see a lot of firms also incorporating a lot of these behavioral points and giving back certain incentives like, money back policy if you stay healthy, so those are things. And epigenetics is a huge study as such, which really focuses on the behavioral and the lifestyle. It's very nice and kudos to you for bringing that value into the product as such. If can you walk us a little more about the features of your product?
Sure. And so, because we need to collect a lot of data, one of the design principles in the product was to be able to easily integrate third party data sources. So, just as a principle, we make it easy to integrate third party data sources. Today, we've integrated to Apple Health Kit, Fitbit, Samsung,
Oh,
Garmin,
nice.
Epic EMR system,
Yeah.
and we'll continue to integrate into more data sources. We also collect information manually. Once we
Mhm.
collect that, we visualize that in a very easy to understand dashboard that lets individuals know for a particular metric, is it in a normal range? Is it in a range that's above normal range or below normal range? And so that information itself allows them to take some kind of informed action to improve that. Utilize AI to look across all this comprehensive kind of information we have, including medical history as well, because we collect that to provide personalized recommendations so that their journey to being healthier is guided by a kind of a very comprehensive and broad understanding and deep understanding of their health. And so, in addition to those recommendations, again, the gamification component, which drives and incentivizes that behavior change. So, those are really the core features of the software. But I think one of the primary differentiators um, is that when you talk about end users and you're talking about kind of medical information, we found that a lot of times there's a gap between a lot of these platforms when they're collecting medical information and the way they present that to an end user. It's still kind of in like doctor jargon, a medical jargon that makes it
Yeah.
really hard for an individual that's not a medical professional to respond to. We
Right.
totally simplify that just through simple language, and we found that to be pretty impactful as well.
I like that, especially when you save the history, medical history of a patient, you can always see, okay, what have I done right? What have I done wrong? And kudos to my lifestyle changes that, okay, my probably, I'm doing well in this certain areas. So yeah, those are very useful. So as a company evolved, how did that early vision influence the way you design the product and its data foundation?
Sure. Well, we tried to future proof it. I've been in technology for 30 years, and I know that things can change pretty rapidly, no more so than the last 5 years, which has been crazy with AI. But because of the expectation that we would bring on new data sources, there would be new metrics that would be able to be captured from the human body, it became very important that the platform be designed in a very easy way to bring that information in. And so that was really a key kind of design principle. And we're seeing that manifest itself. We didn't want to necessarily be locked into any kind of specific hardware in terms of the device that we're pulling in metrics from, because again, that's changing very rapidly with increasing processing power, AI. We're finding new devices that are monitoring different metrics come online like every year. There's something new. And the fact that we can tap into that pretty easily through an API or through a database connection, it gives our platform the ability to be, no matter where the data is coming from, offer a layer of intelligence for that particular data source.
Okay. So you are taking all the input from this multiple sensors and trying to store them and apply AI on top of it and give a more explainable journey to the end user. Is that
Absolutely.
correct?
Yes,
Okay.
it's so many times, people will ask, what's the difference between what you guys are doing and Apple or some other
Yeah.
vendor? And I
Yeah.
draw the distinction by first letting them know that it almost doesn't matter what vendor they're talking about. They're probably a really good solution. Like technology is advanced to a point where, you know,
Mm.
in a lane that you're operating in, most vendors are pretty good in offering value. And so we
Mhm.
don't necessarily see it as like we're all competitors. I think most of us are trying to bring value to the world by driving greater health. And so we
Right.
see it as like this is a perspective that whether it be Apple Health Kit or whether it be a Samsung device, or whether it be a Gorman device and their solution, they're providing a really great perspective and insight in that lane. But
Mhm.
that's like a vertical lane. We are a horizontal platform that sits over across the top of those different verticals and silos of information. And we harmonize all of that to provide a much more comprehensive view. And so that's how I would differentiate kind of Excellent Life from some of the other data source providers that we're capturing information from.
Yeah, that kind of was one of my question as to how do you like there are so many wellness and engagement platforms, right, in the market, from content driven apps to survey based tools. Like how does Excellent Life kind of differentiate itself in terms of intelligence, personalization and outcome measurements rather than just any activity tracking? So
Yeah,
I
and
think
and that's exactly it. We knew that by collecting a very comprehensive data set, like the way that we can analyze that and make sense of it would by itself be a differentiator, because certainly, it's important to know that, okay, if I have high blood pressure, that's not a good thing. But if you
yeah,
understand you have high blood pressure in the context of maybe heart attacks being a problem in your family, if you understand that in the context of the environment that you're in, like maybe it's a really hot environment because we collect environmental data as well, um, that could kind of agitate your condition. And so all these things understood in combination can get us to, oh, this is a critical situation that needs to be addressed right now, as opposed to this is a situation we need to watch, which is two totally different kind of scenarios.
right, right. So, when dealing with well being related data, trust and governance are critical. So, what do you think about data quality, privacy, and responsible AI, especially when insights may influence leadership decisions or employee support strategies? Like, how important is data maturity for organization using tools like yours?
Yeah, I think there are a number of strategies that can be effective, but there are procedures and processes and methods that you have to put in place, because data quality is paramount, especially when you're talking about healthcare. Ultimately, it could be a decision support tool, but it can mean life or death. If you're bringing in like bad data, it's not going to lead to a good outcome. So, the approach that I like to take, that we kind of built in the Excellent Life, is that certainly you can read in a value from a data source. And so you're depending a little bit on that data source and kind of how well it's calibrated, how precise it is. And so that's a part of it. So you want to make sure that the data source is a reputable and dependable source. But also, to get beyond that, you can start looking for changes, because even if, and this is a kind of an extreme scenario, if I'm pulling data from a single data source and like the it's not a great data source, so it's going to give me a number, and let's say that number is a little bit alarming. Rather than to act on that number by itself, if I'm collecting other data sources, information from other data sources, in comparison, I may see that as an anomaly. And over the course of time, if that remains an anomaly, then it starts to identify that potentially that particular data source may be kind of the outlier, not the actual individual. The other thing that we can look at is what is the change, because even if it's a a data source is not calibrated correctly, it will be calibrated in a way where it's measuring consistently. So if it's measuring consistently in a certain way, and then all of a sudden we see a drop or a rise, we know that that change is an indication of something. And so looking
Mhm.
for magnitude of change, consistency in across multiple data sources are all methods that you can utilize to ensure that your decision that you're making out of all of this is a pretty informed decision supported by good data.
Right, right. And also, we have worked with organization, and I know exactly what you're saying, Victor, especially in the data quality. Especially, we worked with the public sector health agencies, where definitely, applying some of the standardization like HL7 and HIPAA compliant and NEEM standards of modeling the data and, exchange. I think we can reduce the data quality issues pretty much in those areas. So, moving on to like what were some of the hardest challenges in scaling a platform that blends AI with human behavior, particularly when outcomes like well-being or resilience aren't always as straightforward to measure as revenue or productivity?
Yeah, that's a question that's evolved a little bit very rapidly here recently. So I'll explain by starting out. The most challenging thing is to do a lot with a little, because as a tech company that wants to be on the leading edge of technology in our approach to driving greater wellness, it really helps to have a really big budget to be on the leading edge of technology. When you don't have a
Mm,
big budget because we haven't raised a lot of capital, you have to be very creative in terms of how you get from point A to point B.
yeah,
So
very true.
we've had to figure out ways to do that. I think it's helped, given that I spent my entire career in technology, and even before my professional career. I think the fifth grade was when we got an Apple IIe computer. So I started programming when I was in the fifth grade. And while I haven't programmed hardcore in many years, I know what it takes to get a software product to global markets. I've seen it from every perspective. So that meant that in terms of getting a product, I was able to get that done with outsourcing using incredible developers at a very inexpensive cost to Excellent Life. But eventually, even that became um, a hurdle because you only have a finite pot of
Yeah.
finances when you haven't raised
Hmm.
a ton of capital.
Yeah.
But this is where the evolution of what the industry what's happening in the industry now is come into play, and it's created an opportunity for Excellent Life. With AI, it takes a fraction of the cost now to develop, and so I kind of dived in back into some development myself using some vibe coding,
Oh,
and
nice.
really, built out the next version of our platform myself.
Oh,
And
very good.
I think the more technical you are, you can do a few more sophisticated things. So I was able
Yeah.
to play around and in a short amount of time, duplicate and evolve kind of our old platform to present a new platform, which we had a soft launch in January. And we're growing our user base slow, getting feedback. We'll have a more formal launch at the end of February or early March. But I'm really excited about that. I've been like a kid in a candy store with this vibe coding stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. It's especially if you're a builder at heart, you like to develop something and fail fast. So I think that's a great way to really get some feedback from the market. So what tech stack do you use, Victor? I'm sure the engineering community would be interested. What would be your favorites in this?
Yeah, so I mean, it's open source. We developed a progressive web app, so we gave some consideration to developing native apps using React but I started to really look at some of the trends, and for many years it made sense to have a native app because accessing the resources on the mobile device was a little more difficult with a progressive web app. But today, technology has evolved so much that even with a progressive web app, you can still access some of the resources on the mobile device, and you're developing on like a single platform. And so, in terms of maintaining that, in terms of reducing costs, for the purpose of what we're doing, it makes a lot of sense. So, this is the first time we developed using a progressive web app. Right now, I'm loving it because it's just so easy to maintain. I can get feedback about something that, probably good to change or some kind of update. I can
Mhm.
deploy that update in 10 minutes. It's done.
Wow.
It's just incredible. Like, I mean, this probably sounds crazy to a lot of people, but by comparison, across, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years, I probably invested 80,000 in development. In my 80,000, because I did it at very, very low cost, fraction of what someone else would. It would probably take someone that's not as s- spent their entire career in the industry. It probably cost them 500,000 or maybe even 1 million to develop the software that we had. So that's 80K across 3.5 years. It
Wow,
took
that's impressive.
that was a lot. I heard a lot of people say, "How much you guys, spend in development? Is it 1 million, 500,000?" It was nowhere close to that. However, I duplicated that for about $250, and it took me 2.5 weeks.
And what kind of tools do you like vouch on?
So I use Replit. I know that I was not as comfortable with the deployment to put that in a development production environment. So I only outsourced that part of it, but I developed the platform in Replit. I deployed that to a production environment. I had help doing that, but in total, it was like I said, probably $250. And like when you think about the difference there, time wise, cost wise, AI is changing everything. And that's just one vertical. I call it like technology, just development. That's one area. But AI is having an impact across every single function of business. And so there's some good with that. But there's also some fallout that I don't know that we've figured out as a society how we're going to handle that fallout.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. So you also must be calling some OpenAI LLM models as APIs and
Yes,
integrating some of the healthcare API integrations as well, right? So
correct.
would you be able to share some light on that for the engineering community as well?
We just did a simple connect to Open API. So this can always be debatable because I'm an engineer by trade, but I think my mind is kind of the bigger picture in the application. So a lot of times engineers spend so much time talking about precision, speed, 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 speed. But at the application level, that's never realized. It almost is insignificant. It doesn't matter. So when you're talking about a person in particular in the underserved community who has no information, no insight, no solution, to get down to the LLM that might say one thing that's slightly different than another LLM, it's insignificant. Like they just, hey, you're not healthy right now because you're abnormal. That's all they need to know. And from there they can speak with a doctor. So to spend additional cycles debating the precision of your large language model versus some other model, in some applications, in my opinion, it's a moot point. It doesn't matter. But again, I'm sure there are plenty of people that would debate that. It's just we're certainly going to take an approach where at the application level, we're focused on that impact, especially when we have limited resources. If we had a treasure trove of financing, then we would probably play in the game of let's create value in the organization by coming up with this
Right.
LLM that is significantly different. But in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to compete in that area, especially when there are much bigger players who are out there, doing it themselves. We'll just leverage what they come up with.
So there is a growing assumption that more data automatically leads to better well-being outcomes. Have you found situations where less data or slower, more intentional interventions actually produce better results? How do you balance insights with overwhelm?
Yeah, I think in general, I would agree with that. But I think in practice, for our experience, we're so early on and we don't have enough to say one way or the other. I think I could probably come up with scenarios where like too much data, the time to analyze it, the cost to analyze it, spreading that cost to the payer or the customer, it becomes like that's a negative impact. When in
Mhm.
comparison, you can take a smaller amount of data, get to the same general kind of idea about what's going on, have less costs for yourself, therefore charge the user less and have a greater impact. So there are all these kind of business, reasons as to why ultimately in some cases you don't need a whole bunch of data because you have the cost of data storage, the cost of data processing. All of it gets passed on to someone. And then there's a whole community of people right now who are suffering because they're finding more and more subsidies that have been taken away from them. So the question becomes, how do you support that community and others at a cost that is more approachable or effective for that user base? And so that always needs to be a part of the innovation as well.
Interesting. So, can you share a specific example where Excellent Life helped an organization or group make a meaningful improvement, whether you're reducing burnout or improving engagement or supporting healthier leadership behaviors?
Sure.
What did success look like from data and human perspective?
Right. So just in terms of creating a baseline with organization, we were able to kind of go in and do some pre and post surveys to get a good profile of like what is the status quo now historically for the organization. Like how many, what is your absentee rate? How many medical incidents are you having per year? Like all these things that are pretty important. Those medical incidents are associated with average cost. Asking users like how engaged are you? Just these subjective questions, but once we were able to do that, we had a good profile so that we can measure the impact we're having in our organization. So we got that measurement. We deployed our solution, started running these wellness competition inside the organization. And so what we saw was an increased engagement, increased healthy behavior, increased health education. And we also saw a reduction in healthcare related costs because there was also a reduction in health related incidents across a 6-month time span. And so those reductions were significant and really served to be validation for what we can do in our software. So we're utilizing those 3 pilots to actually actively go out and chase more opportunities, pilots, customers. We're early stage. We haven't had a lot of funding, but we're really excited about those pilot numbers that we were able to achieve.
Nice. Yeah. So that would bring us to another round of questions. So, what would be your message to investors and probably the tech community or just community at large be?
Right. So for investors that are getting involved early in SaaS companies, AI empowered companies that are targeting making the world a better place through empowering health, Excellent Life would be a great investment. And I say that not necessarily just because of our technology and our approach. Over the course of my professional career, what I've learned is that it's never the product, it's never the technology, it's never the strategy, it's always people. And so at Excellent Life, we have 6 core values: integrity, teamwork, dedication, passion, family, and service. And every single individual that's affiliated with Excellent Life, they embody those qualities. I've always challenged myself to surround myself with incredible people, and I benefited from being able to do that. And I've always found that people and teams are the reason why organizations win. And so we have an incredible team.
Yeah. And any words for the community at large and any engineering community that you would like to give any message?
Sure. I'd say that keep an eye out for Excellent Life. Again, we've had a soft launch of our software platform. We've done some incredible innovations on it. Uh,
Nice.
you can access that platform through going to our website. That's www.excellentlife.com. That's spelled with an X, CELLENT, life.com. We'd love to have you check out our new platform. We'd love to have you walk with us on our journey of making the world a better place and support us in that journey as well. And I always love to have a conversation about collaborating. So for those other innovators, entrepreneurs, companies, partners who want to innovate and want to collaborate in making the world a better place, definitely reach out. I always love having those conversations.
Wonderful. So, one thing, what just on the related front, so what is the future of AI in well-being, and what do you think students or engineers or future founders should be thinking about now if they want to build responsibly in this space?
Yeah, well, I think they have to incorporate AI at this point. There's no choice other than incorporating AI if they actually want to have a chance of being successful. So I'd say that, and I feel strongly about that. And I also would say that, whether you're grew up in technology or not, just take some time out and start learning a little bit about AI. It could be 10, 15 minutes a day. Arm yourself with at least the knowledge of some of the terminology
Hmm.
because what we're going to see, I think, trending is it being a greater demand of people who have some knowledge of AI and how to leverage that, and a much dwindling demand of anyone who's not on with that skill set. And so I think that is going to create some ripple effects that may not be comfortable for a lot of people. So I have some concerns around that.
Okay. I know AI skills you said rightly, Victor, but is there any specific language or platform that you think will help the future builders?
Uh, I don't know if I have a specific platform. I mean, I use Replit but there are other platforms. There are platforms that for people who are even more technical than myself, they would probably choose that over Replit. For people who are less technical than myself, they're probably better choices than Replit. Like Lovable might be uh, a choice for someone who's not, like not, as technical. But by and large, like the way these platforms are operating now with technology, you can be someone that has no tech background whatsoever and still manage to develop an app. So it democratizes the ability to be creative. It lowers the cost of and lowers the barriers of starting companies and being innovative and bringing your ideas to life. So that's a really good thing.
Hmm.
It's going to create a lot more competition for access to dollars. Um, and I think it's also going to raise the bar in terms of the expectations that investors have before they start writing checks. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to get a check to build something. Um, you're going to, even at seed and pre-seed, they're going to be looking for like revenue before they start writing checks. And it's just going to be an adjustment for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. I know technology has become much easier to solve, programming, wipe coding. All of this has made it technology much easier. I think the real crux of all this is what is the value add that is it's bringing, as a product, how much outreach does it have? So I think definitely investors for them, it's a big thing about those numbers as such. So
Yeah, I agree.
we're coming to a lightning round, which is what is one misconception about AI in well-being or mental health?
I think one misconception is that when you talk about AI, a lot of people think about both, ends of the spectrum. Like it's going to be something that's going to cause this incredible advancement and it's going to be make the world a happier place versus the perspective, the other end of the spectrum, oh, this is going to be the end of the world. This is Terminator, Armageddon. And so because there are these two polarized kind of views, I think the utilization of AI can be very debated in heated ways sometimes. But I
Hmm.
think that the middle ground, which is where I think a lot of the creators and the innovators operating, there's a ton of value, and people are working to make sure that they're bringing value to the application to their targeted audience.
Yeah.
And so that part is comforting. The underlying technology, I agree, can be a little scary. Because I've not seen anything like AI. Again, being in technology my entire life, the rapid, evolution of the power of AI is not been like anything I've ever seen before.
Mm. And it's interesting, actually, at least in the mental health and well being, it is definitely acting as a very well balance of a personal assistant. And I've also seen the underlying OpenAI or Gemini or Claude or any of the things, even if you're using it for personal chat, there's a barrier. They would say, hey, I cannot counsel you before that. It's not my job. There are a lot of things which are put in place, the guardrails, which is kudos to all these companies which are taking it very responsibly to the next level. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
what is the metric that you care about that doesn't always show up on dashboards?
For me, because we're so early in, I guess, our efforts of growing our user base, growing our customer base, rather than to always look at the scoreboard being revenue, margin, kind of those major growth numbers. I know that though the revenue and margin is a function of activity and it's a function of process and it's a function of effort. So for me, I look at like how many contacts am I having on a daily basis? Like, not to say it's a numbers game, but it's a numbers game. So
It
if
is.
you got to have more conversations. So as long as I'm actively having those conversations with potential partners, with potential investors, with potential customers, then that's just a part of the process. And I try to hold myself accountable for holding those competitions.
Yeah. I mean, not just for numbers also. Sometimes it's more like, those are for also validity of an idea and usage. So those do play some role. So what is the hardest trade-off you've faced as a founder?
For me, it's the kind of the loneliness of kind of the people that I grew up with or became my really close friends, not really fully understanding what I do. And so like they know that I do something, but they don't fully understand it. So being an entrepreneur can be a lonely road. I
Yeah.
also left kind of an environment where I was compensated pretty well because I spent 20 years in the energy sector and highly regulated. Worked as a and led the sales and marketing organizations for a small company. And so that was a very refreshing thing to get a check that came in every single month, or actually two checks. And so it starts to become a little more difficult when you're chasing a passion and a purpose, and that
Yeah.
same consistency is not there.
Yeah.
So I think entrepreneurs should certainly be prepared for that.
Yes, I know. It's not a shiny word. There is a responsibility that comes with, so the journey can be a little lonely at the top. But yeah, thanks to a lot of these mentors and
Right.
yeah, services which help you, So yeah, I agree. What is one capability leaders will need as AI becomes more human facing?
I think leaders will certainly need the capacity to understand themselves the importance of connecting to people because with that understanding I think it allows them as a leader to put the measures in place to ensure that there's always the appropriate interaction that they as a leader are having with people, understanding that the right mechanisms are placed to maintain humanity and so that they're not so hands off where everything is so automated that they lose touch with humanity and as a result lose touch with the connectivity that makes organizations great. So I think that's a really important, trait for leaders to have.
A belief that you held early on about well being that has since changed.
I would say I believe that well-being at one point in time was like very much centered around the decision, well, still centered around the choices that the individual was making. And while that's a big component of well-being, there are so many environmental factors that play into that. If you're born in one zip code versus a different zip code, that can impact your well-being in a significant way because of things that are not necessarily equivalent in one area versus another area. You may not have the same access. So when solving a problem like that in a broad way, you have to factor that in as opposed to looking at like, well, this person's making all the right decisions versus this person making all the wrong decisions. Why is it happening? Well, how can it happen? What kind of constraints allowed it to happen? And so that's when you really start to try to get to the core of solving those really challenging problems.
Very well said. So, Victor, thank you for a thoughtful and a grounded conversation in AI leadership and human sustainability. I mean, your work is pretty inspiring, especially the way you walked us through Excellent Life and the purpose behind it, what you're doing to make the lives better. And kudos to you. Journey of founders is never easy, but the mission you're trying to solve, good luck with that, Victor. And thank you for joining the show. If anybody wants to reach out, we will definitely drop the links, but what is the best way to reach out?
But definitely through the website, they can email me, victor.brown at excellentlife.com. Again, that's spelled XCELLENT life.com. And again, I always love to have a conversation. And I find that through most conversations I have, I'm taking some away that's making me be a better person and hopefully contributing as well. So I always look forward to dialogue.
All right, wonderful, Victor. Thank you so much for being a part of this show. I'm sure a lot of the insights are super useful, helpful to the community at large, actually.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show, and I look forward to staying in contact.
Thanks.